Okay.
Is Anna Wachnicka here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, gotcha. I see you.
Okay. Hi.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and turn off my video and just call on me if you need me.
Simon,
Okay, well, we still are not quite at 6:30 yet, so I'm gonna give it 2 more minutes for folks to trickle in, and then we'll kick things off at 6:31.
Hi, Monica. This is Cinder. Can I check with you? Do you prefer for me to show your presentation slides or for you to do it?
Hey, Cinder, just put yourself on mute, although that was very professional.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, he's under. I don't have a preference necessarily, so if it's easier, I can just share my screen.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hey.
Hi, Luis.
Nice to see you again, Rachel.
Hi, Albert. Hopefully the tech works better this evening. Sorry, I had to.
I'm laughing inside.
Okay, but audibly too. Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Welcome to North Bay Village, albeit virtually.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Madam Chair, is that okay with you?
it sounds good to go. Rachel, over to you.
Okay, fantastic. Greetings, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. My name is Rachel Streitfeld, and I'm the Treasure Island Commissioner in North Bay Village, formerly the Vice Chair of the North Bay Village Sustainability and Resilience Task Force. We are gathered here today in the aftermath of an event that feels like it was a decade ago, but it was really just over the summer. And it was the massive fish kill event in Biscayne Bay, particularly in the North Bay around our village, that really lit a fire under our collective bottoms and made us hyper aware of the sensitivity of Biscayne Bay and the critical point that we are at with the health of Biscayne Bay. And though we are a very small community in North Bay Village, we have a very powerful voice on the stage of Miami-Dade County, and we have committed ourselves to utilizing that voice in a number of different ways. The concern that was expressed by our residents, our neighbors, our kayak and paddle community, folks who walk up and down the bay all day long, every day, is what has brought us here tonight, which is to discuss what is going on with Biscayne Bay and the ways that we can make a difference in pushing it in the right direction. So while Denise O'Brien, the chair of our Sustainability and Resilience Task Force, has been instrumental in putting this together, she has the support of the entire North Bay Village Commission. And I want to just recognize that joining us tonight, we have Commissioner Juliana Strout, who has participated in a number of cleanups and has been dedicated to resilience along with the rest of our commission. And then of course, we have our fearless leader, Mayor Brent Latham, who is here with us as well. I want to shout out both of you. And then Dr. Rosado, our village manager, who has supported all of the requests and efforts and initiatives that we have thrown at him over the course of the last 6 months as it pertains to the health of Biscayne Bay. Before I turn it over to Denise O'Brien to introduce our speakers, I do just want to give you a quick rundown of the steps that North Bay Village has taken thus far, because they are significant and we are very proud that we are leading by example. We were the first city in Miami-Dade County to pass the Florida-friendly fertilizer ban, for example, or the Florida-friendly fertilizer ordinance, I should say. We've also passed a single-use plastic ordinance and have our own NBV plastic-free campaign to reduce single-use plastics, both as far as pollution is concerned, but also in Biscayne Bay. We just this week at our Sustainability and Resilience Task Force heard a new ordinance as well as a new administrative policy that is going to apply to construction sites if it is passed, and that is going to be a stormwater protection plan to make sure that all future construction sites are being conscientious in protecting the bay. We also are working with our partners at FDOT and Miami-Dade Derm to hopefully do something about adding some mangroves or other green life along the Kennedy Causeway to hopefully oxygenate the bay in an area that critically needs oxygen. And we are about to embark on a stormwater master plan in North Bay Village. And one of the highest priorities of our stormwater master plan will be, of course, water quality. So those are just a handful of the things that we are doing. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our main moderator tonight, although I will reserve the privilege of interrupting and asking questions and calling on some folks whose hands are raised. And if anyone in the audience has a question, which is the purpose of tonight, which is why we've done it town hall, you can just click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen. A window will pop up, and on the bottom right, you can just click raise your hand, and either I or Denise will call on you. And we are just, I have to say just a little bit about Denise O'Brien, who comes to North Bay Village after a career in global diplomacy on climate action at the United Nations. We are so blessed that she found her way to North Bay Village and that she's leading the efforts on our Sustainability and Resilience Task Force. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our panel tonight.
Rachel, thank you so much. That was a very good introduction. And I see some very, very familiar and friendly faces on the panel. And we are so thankful to you for participating. As you know, it is thanks to each one of you on the panel that have been working with North Bay Village that have allowed us to have such a leadership role in this field. So I want to turn over to Irela Bagué, first of all, because of her role as chair of the Biscayne Bay Task Force. That is the framework that we hope is going to be able to allow for coordinated action to have effective results in turning around the disaster that is our bay now. Irela, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Danny, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Streitfeld, and Mr. Manager. It's always a pleasure. North Bay Village is a very special place for all of us and a very special location. So it's my pleasure to be here with you all tonight. I guess we can pull up our presentation, and I'm just going to give an overview of the Biscayne Bay Task Force, how we were created and why. And so really, the task force was a call to action from the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit that was held in 2017. And I'm really pleased to see many of our steering committee members tonight joining us for this conversation. Really, we held the summit to understand why Biscayne Bay was already experiencing that significant seagrass die-off, and particularly in the northern part of the watershed where you all are located. That event basically led to the creation of the task force. Miami-Dade County enacted it. We held our first meeting back in June of 2019. We were charged with developing a final report with recommendations to improve the health of Biscayne Bay, primarily water quality, and really getting down to understanding what was going on. We held 18 meetings, heard 35 presentations from everyone from the federal government, state, county, municipal governments, including some of the folks from North Bay Village, academia, environmental organizations, and the general public. I'm really concerned about the health of Biscayne Bay. So next slide. If you can move it. So I don't know if you all remember some of these headlines, but this is what we were dealing with when we began meeting. So these headlines were just making our work all the more urgent. I don't have to go into too much detail, but we all know what the issues were and what we were trying to solve. Next slide. So basically what we confirmed is that what happens on the land ends up in the bay. The nutrient pollution obviously fuels the overgrowth of the algae and the bacteria, leading to, the low levels of oxygen that are incredibly harmful to the bay ecosystem over the long term, and hence what happened, a little bit after. And we all saw that in August. Next slide. So we also realized that there were many folks out there doing great things for the Bay, government agencies, local governments, just as yourselves, environmental organizations, everyone working on solutions, FIU, everyone, but nothing was really being coordinated in a unified way. So when we finalized our report over a year later, we recommended an overarching governing structure and really an administrative structure that would work to develop a watershed management plan to really focus on the long-term recovery of Biscayne Bay. We developed over 60 recommendations in our final report, and I know that we can make that report available to all you if you don't have it. Next slide. So we divided the recommendations in 7 policy themes, obviously with a key focus on water quality. And what we wanted to do was, of course, it's going to take a while for the Bay to recover. It's a long-term approach. And if you look at what Tampa did, it took them 20 years. However, there are things that could be implemented immediately. And so we tried to structure our recommendations in such a way that the county can use the data that they have today and the funding that they have today and start moving some projects forward and really taking some immediate actions. Of course, some others will take a little longer, more collaboration and funding, but again, together we can move forward. Next slide. So obviously, I don't need to remind North Bay Village about what happened this past August. Many of our Bay advocates had been saying this would be happening, and unfortunately it did. We couldn't have predicted that our presentation of our report would coincide with this event, but I have to say that it made our report really shine and really focus on the urgency of what needs to happen. So from every bad event comes something good. And honestly, I've been saying that, the souls of these poor little fish really helped us elevate the report, where now we can move to the next one. So these are some of the actions that were taken immediately. And since our presentation of our report was submitted to the county commission, and I'm happy to say that we finally got a state of emergency that we have been advocating for years as far as a coalition. We passed a fertilizer ordinance. The hiring of a chief bay officer was budgeted, and that position is currently being developed and hopefully coming online soon. And that position really is important because it is going to set the stage and build partnerships that will ensure that the recommendations are implemented and not shelved as other reports previously have been, and really set up a coalition and a coordinated approach to Biscayne Bay's recovery. And I just want to thank North Bay Village for your leadership, Mayor Latham again, Commissioner Streitfeld, Commissioner Stroud, the members of the commission individually, the Sustainability Committee, Denny, for your leadership, and the village manager. You guys have really set the stage for what can be done at the local level. And you even hosted the Save the Bay rally. You really helped elevate the issue countywide, and I really appreciate that because it makes our work and our report move forward on many levels. And just to close, we all know that the Bay's recovery will take time, but the key to the success will be if we all work together at all levels of government, including bringing in the public and educating the public, making that connection that we all have to the Bay, because it's also a treasure, but a quality of life, but it's also our economy. It's a mainstay of our economy. So with that, I really appreciate everything we're doing to try to help save Biscayne Bay. with that, I'm done and we can move on.
Without a strategy, without a framework, all the individual actions of little different actions all over this area wouldn't add up. So that's why we needed this work of your task force to provide a framework and a coordinating mechanism so we can really add up to greater than the sum of the parts. All right, so going on from there, we will have two government agencies to see how government agencies will be trying to deal with the recommendations from the task force. And our first speaker from government agencies is Monica Gregory from the Miami-Dade Office of Resiliency. I have to say that the Miami-Dade Office of Resiliency has been holding our hand from the very first day when this new commission with the new mayor, Mayor Latham, took over 2 years ago. We had nothing. The mayor created this task force on resiliency. We didn't even know where to start. So where did we start? We started with the Miami-Dade Office of Resiliency, who held our hand, had several meetings with us, told us, how to put things together. So we'll always be thankful. So we're very interested to hear from you what you feel are some of the key challenges, what your office is doing. And over to you on that, Monica. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Denny. And, thank you so much for inviting our office. I remember 2 years ago when we came to present and you were getting organized around the theme of climate change and sustainability. And it's so great to see all the progress that you've made. It's really astonishing, and we really admire the work that you're doing. So let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen here and let me know if you can see it.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So our Office of Resilience, we are housed in Miami-Dade County, and I wanted to just open with, we have an overarching framework in our office, and the county has really rallied behind what we call the Greater Miami and the Beaches Resilient 305 strategy. And our very first action in that strategy is preserving and protecting Biscayne Bay. So the county is 100% behind the Biscayne Bay Task Force report and recommendations. We've been obviously very involved, and so thankful to Irela for leading that effort as our chairwoman. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what our office has been doing and give you some examples of projects that we're working on in the Office of Resilience. So right now, the Resilient 305 strategy, we have two major projects that are Action 7 and Action 10, and they're very tangential to preserving and protecting Biscayne Bay. So the Office of Resilience, really what I work on for the majority of the time is climate change and sea level rise. And we are about to launch our sea level rise strategy, which we've been working on for about 2 years now. So we're hoping to release it in December or early 2021. And I wanted to draw your attention to these guiding principles that we created with a lot of community input, a lot of input from departments and across jurisdictions. And one of our guiding principles is to reduce environmental pollution. And we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, but also pollution in our waterways. And another of ours, the fifth one there, is building with nature. So we're hoping to work more with the natural processes, natural materials, and really expand that green infrastructure. So these guiding principles are really going to be guiding all of our future adaptation actions within the county and across jurisdictions. So here we have one of the main chapters in our sea level rise strategy, where we're talking about, we have 5 different approaches here. So one of the key approaches that we'll be putting forth as something that municipalities, cross-jurisdictional organizations, community members can really rally behind is the creating blue and green neighborhoods down here on the bottom right corner. But we have these 5 approaches. We're saying, to adapt to sea level rise, including, improving water quality. We have a lot of different options, and these options can work in different places. We can continue building on fill, which means really elevating the land. We can expand blue and greenways. So more of those large green infrastructure projects, like along the canals. We can build on high ground around transit. We could build like the Keys on pilings and allow flooding to happen more often, or we can create blue and green neighborhoods. And likely in all of these different areas that we have across the county, we'll have some combination of these approaches. And these approaches within the strategy, as you'll see, we have tools that really make up those approaches. And across the county, we already have examples of all of these tools that are being implemented by the county, but also we know by municipalities as well. So right now, we do have 10 key actions that we're putting forth to advance in the sea level rise strategy that are very complementary to what's in the Biscayne Bay Task Force report. So hopefully once those are released, we can come back to North Bay Village and work with you to really localize some of those and see which key pieces could work for Biscayne Bay recovery, for water quality improvements, and how we can work with you a little more closely to implement potentially these approaches to maybe modify the resources so that you can use it in your own outreach, but also with the 10 key actions, which policies you might be able to modify a little and advance locally. So here is an example of one of those approaches. I just wanted to highlight again, we're trying to advance the use of green infrastructure, the use of swales, of permeable surfaces. We have examples of this across the county. And this really is very related to the Biscayne Bay Task Force report recommendations because we're hoping that we can advance some of these projects that will help us hold water, retain that water so that whenever we have heavy rainfall events, storm surge events, we have places where we can hold it, filter it before it reaches the canals in the bay to help improve some of that water quality issue that we're experiencing. And that brings me really to action 10, which is what we're currently working on and might be of interest to you because we're launching that initiative now. So action 10 in the Resilient 305 strategy is strengthening our resilience planning efforts. So we're releasing this framework with the 5 approaches that could work all across the county, and different approaches can work in different areas. So what we're trying to do is to localize those approaches. And we're really starting what we call adaptation action areas. So here on the right, you see this map, and it's showing the watershed, the watershed basins in Miami-Dade County. So in 2016, we did a pilot program in Arch Creek, and now we're doing another program in Little River to really localize these 5 approaches and these policies to see what projects can we create to advance for funding and which policies are most needed to improve things like water quality. Because as you all know, we've been seeing a lot of issues in the Little River area. So we know there are a lot of septic tanks in Miami-Dade County and the unincorporated areas. We know we're experiencing a lot of king tide flooding, stormwater management issues, some damage to the roads, to the homes, and a lot of those things are ending up in the bay. So in order to localize some of the work that we're doing, we are using these adaptation action areas as a pilot project. And we're hoping that we can also work with other municipalities to see, how these resources that we've created can be used, in North Bay Village and other areas. So really what you can do is continue your impressive, very progressive work in North Bay Village. I would say for anyone listening on the line, continue volunteering what you can. So your time, your resources, if you have financial resources, your expertise like you're doing tonight. And as always, please contact us at the Office of Resilience if you're working on any projects related to water quality, sea level rise, climate change. We can always put you in contact with our colleagues at DERM, or we can provide to you trainings on flood risk. We can provide to you plans, graphics, and recommendations. So once you release that sea level rise strategy, we can work with you to see how do we localize those actions, which you'll see once it's released is very tangential to the Biscayne Bay Task Force report. And here's my contact information, just throwing that up there for you.
Thank you so much, Wachnicka. And be careful, don't make those offers if you don't mean it, because we will be calling you for help.
And we do mean it. Yeah.
So, we'll be there. You have and I also want to highlight the importance of the Little River plan for North Bay Village, because that is the canal that is right here, right behind us, and is spewing all into the area around North Bay Village. So for us, it's very important, and it has been identified as one of the canals. Some studies say it sends in 60% more water than other canals. So it is crucial for the entire northern part of the bay where we're located. So now we're going on to South Florida Water Management District. And we have Anna Wachnicka, who's going to be making a presentation, but we also have Armando Vilaboy. So I don't know who wants to go and how you want to do it. I think we're starting with Anna, is that right?
Right, that's it.
Over to you, Anna.
Okay, let me just share it, what I have. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
All right, okay, let me just put it on a full screen. Okay, so I think I'm just gonna go ahead and thank you all for inviting us to the meeting. We're very happy to be here. My name is Anna Wachnicka, and I'm a lead scientist in Applied Science Bureau at South Florida Water Management District. And I am also a resident of Miami-Dade County. I've been living in Miami for the last 20 years. And I received my doctoral degree from Florida International University in 2009. And most of my work actually has been done in Biscayne Bay. So the dissertation was done on Biscayne Bay salinity and historical changes in salinity. I worked with NOAA, with Dr. Joan Browder on algal blooms and water quality issues in Biscayne Bay. And my current position at the district, I also am heavily involved in Biscayne Bay restoration projects, the BBC that currently started in October. And also we are investigating impacts of freshwater inflows on ecosystem in South Biscayne Bay and also Northeast Florida Bay. So I have a very long history working in a bay, and I'm very happy to present today. So this is our system of canals. So we have about dozens of canals and structures throughout this region. And those structures have been developed in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s. So you can see that the first canals that were built was Miami Canal in 1920s, and then Miami Canal was developed in 1930s. And then during the Central and Southern Florida project, we developed dense system of canals and levees throughout this area. So we basically ended up with this very complex system that we have today. But this development was due to the rapid population growth in Southeast Florida. And during that time, most of the natural creeks and rivers that we used to have that delivered water into the bay were converted into the canals. So we lost that sheet flow of water into the bay. And now we have actually, those pulses of water coming from the canals. But without the canals, we wouldn't be able to live here. So the canals protect those areas from flooding. And thanks to the system, we can actually live here and enjoy this beautiful bay. In a wet season, what we do in a wet season, we try to keep the canal stages low. So when the storms come, or like in this year, we have really wet season. So all that excess of water from the surrounding areas, from the watershed, is collected by those canals. And at certain stages, we have to release water to prevent flooding. So we open the gates, and the water is released, through the structures into Biscayne Bay. So this is, our mission. One of the most important goal of the district is to protect our communities from flooding. So we have 3 different systems, drainage systems, that we operate the primary drainage system, but we also have tertiary, secondary drainage system. And those systems are operated or managed by local drainage districts, mainly county and cities. So, in our neighborhoods, the water is collected from surrounding areas and, the little lakes that we have in our neighborhoods. And from that tertiary drainage system, water ends up in a secondary canals. And and the excess of water from the secondary canals that are managed by the local drainage systems end up eventually in the primary canals. And because certain areas in South Florida lie in a very, they're very low-lying areas, like the southern portion of Miami-Dade County. At certain levels, we have to release that water from the canals into the bay. So, this is all done to protect us from flooding, but unfortunately, because, this area is so heavily developed, it's heavily urbanized, with that water come obviously pollution. So then we have, just like it was mentioned by my previous speaker, there are many problems that we're facing throughout the surrounding areas. We have septic tanks, we use fertilizers. So when we have rain, that rain brings the water into the canal. The water is brought into the canals and eventually into the primary canals. And then, unfortunately, we have to release the water into the bay to protect us from flooding. So in terms of water quality monitoring, South Florida Water Management District has this very extensive monitoring system. So this is a map from our DB Hydro environmental database. So all those points represent locations where we monitor water. So we monitor groundwater, we monitor surface water, and we have many near real-time monitoring stations throughout the entire system. Now, this is Biscayne Bay, so you can see it's not as densely, we don't have a dense monitoring network, but this is because, Miami-Dade County basically conducts extensive monitoring of water quality and benthic habitats throughout this area. So we simply, there's no sense for us to overlap. They're doing a great job and have been doing a great job for several years. So, during the events like, this year fish kill event, they will intensify, sampling in this area. And we also have local universities like Florida International University, University of Miami, and also FDP, the Aquatic Preserve staff will also collect data from the affected areas more often. But you can see that we collaborate. So you can see that those are near real-time monitoring stations that are not ours. Those are actually managed by Biscayne National Park, but we partner with them. So the data are also available to the public via our DB Hydro environmental database. So all this data is actually available to public: environmental data, flow data, stage data. So there's really a lot of data that is available to all of us, and we manage this really incredible database. So how are we involved in improving conditions within the bay? We are involved in or manage or co-manage a large restoration projects, such as Biscayne Bay Southeastern Everglades Ecosystem Restoration Project that just began in October. And the goal of the project, and we basically partner with Army Corps of Engineers, and we try to improve ecological and hydrological connectivity between Biscayne Bay, coastal wetlands, model lands, so all the wetlands in the south and the southern part of the system. And also we try to redirect water from the canals into the coastal wetlands, whatever is left of them, and deliver water via sheet flow into the bay. So we try to help to restore that historic salinity conditions within that nearshore area. So this is basically our involvement in Biscayne Bay. And with that, I thank you, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Anna. Armando, do you want to add something? Do you want to go now? Armando, would you like to say something?
I think he might be muted.
I am muted. I'm looking for my my idea to add to share my screen here. Okay. I'm Armando Vilaboy. I'm the regional representative for South Florida Water Management District. I work in an intergovernmental capacity and cover Miami-Dade and Monroe counties. And I know Anna went over some of this in her presentation as well, and we may overlap a little bit, but this is the 3-tier system that she was discussing and that we do have in Miami-Dade County. We have two tier 3, and the secondaries are mostly managed by Miami-Dade County, and the primaries, again, are managed by the South Florida Water Management District. And during hurricane events, the district prepares the canals, and moving water for conveyance purposes is our mission at that point, because we're trying to prevent flooding upstream of these structures. Now, the C7 in particular has had several issues because of king tide, and it's been a very challenging canal to manage because the area is so low lying. So we are having to keep our structures open longer. And I know there's been a conversation, it's been discussion before about, well, has the district changed their operations? And the reality is that, if you ask the engineers, they haven't changed their operations. They're meeting a standard, they're meeting a number, but we are moving more water because of all the rain that we've really had. And the other thing I want to emphasize also is that C7 is actually closed off to the west. So there is no water moving into that system that is not coming out of that basin. So basically everything from Amelia Earhart Park, if you're familiar with Amelia Earhart Park, through to Hialeah, to most of Hialeah Gardens, all the way out to the bay is being moved by the C7 canal. And this is one of the issues we have on the C7 canal. This is at S27. This is the coastal structure after a rain event. And what happens is all this comes out of that secondary and tertiary system. We do our best to manage that. We capture, approximately 85 to 90% of the floating debris that does come through that canal. Here are how we do that with our towboats, and it's a very taxing thing to have to do. We have 366 miles of canal in Miami-Dade County that we have to cover. So we have to bounce around from canal to canal and make sure, number one, it's able to convey water for storm and hurricane protection and flood protection, and also make sure this stuff doesn't also make it to the bay. And we do this, just to give you an example, and I brought it here. This is the times that we have been out this year and the cost for each cleanup. This is not the complete year, but this is more extensive. Typically, a structure at South Florida Water Management District sees maintenance anywhere between 4 and 5 times, 5 times being the highest. We manage 16 counties. So when we take a look at this, we're already exceeding that number in Miami-Dade County almost twofold by the time the year is out. To give you an idea, I don't have the numbers here, but I did the math earlier, and it would be about 336 tons of debris removed specifically from S27 coming out of that secondary, primary, and tertiary system. This also creates hindrances to conveyance also. So this debris also blocks water from moving out when we need to provide flood protection. So it's a twofold issue. Number one, it's affecting the bay, obviously, and it's also affecting our conveyance. This is one of the pump stations. So we have three different types of structures in Miami-Dade County. One of them there are gates and pump stations. This one is on the Miami River. And these pump stations, the reason that I brought the pictures in is because these pump stations, you can see it on this pump station, this is another pump station. These actually have grates. These grates capture all the debris that would otherwise be pumped into the Miami River or in other areas. And actually we lift them up onto the deck there, you can see adjacent to the pumps, and we truck that off to Miami-Dade County. This is a gate. This is what a gated structure would look like. This is what you have similar on S27. This is further down south, but these, and I want to be addressed a little bit how these gates works. There's been a lot of questions on that too. These gates open during low tide and close during high tide. They do not open during high tide to prevent salt water from getting into a freshwater environment and may be impacting our freshwater wells. And that is just a short cover of all the impacts that we have as far as the debris and how we manage that system. Any questions? I'll take any questions.
Armando, thank you so much to both you and Anna. I think everybody, I'm not taking questions right now, but I could give you a dozen just off the top of my head. I think all of us here are so fascinated to just see the extent of the canals and the amount of debris that you're trying to clean out of it before it goes to the bay. And it begs the question of, the easiest way to clean those canals is making sure that the debris doesn't get into it. But I'm not going to start a discussion. I'm supposed to be the one moderating and not discussing. So we will move on now. And in the discussion period, then we'll have time to talk to our two academic research institutions. We have Jim Fourqurean from the Florida International University, who is an expert on seagrass, among other things. And clearly the death of the seagrass in our bay is both a indication of how sick the bay is, but also it also is showing to us how dangerous it can be to have a sick bay because of the killing off of it. But over to you, Jim. I'm not sure which end you're going to tackle on this.
Oh, I don't know either. And it's dangerous to ask a university professor to talk for only 5 minutes, but not have a hook ready to pull me off.
Don't worry.
You guys can see my slides, right? Good. So I'm basically just going to talk, well, first of all, I'm Jim Fourqurean. I've been working in South Florida since the 1980s on all things water quality and seagrasses, Florida Bay and Biscayne Bay. I helped design some of the water quality and seagrass monitoring programs that have been in place in Biscayne Bay since 1990. So I've been here at FIU for quite a long time. And in the time that I've been here, we've grown into one of the premier coastal oceanic research universities in the country and in the hemisphere. We have a tremendous amount of power of students and faculty and funding and great ideas to work on the issues that are important in South Florida. And the president of FIU has a mantra that we want to be a globally recognized but locally committed university. And we see that all the time. And the president of the university is incredibly worried about Biscayne Bay because he looks out onto it every day. And I do as well. So compared to North Bay Village, I'm kind of far from the ocean. I'm actually 400 yards from Biscayne Bay, but down in the Palmetto Bay area. So I usually walk every day down by the bay just to get a good view of it. So what I'm going to do today is just talk about the environmental problems. And then at the end, I want to set the stage for a discussion that we began having with Denny O'Brien and a memorandum of understanding between FIU and North Bay Village to use North Bay Village as an experimental arena for a lot of the environmental work that's being done on the bay at FIU. Okay, my slides did not advance. Sorry about that. I seem to be disconnected from my slides again. Hold on. I hate it when this happens.
Jim, while you're fixing your slides, I do want to just recognize that we have another commissioner with us tonight, and that's Dr. Richard Cervoni, who was also on the founding Sustainability and Resilience Task Force. So welcome, Dr. Cervoni, Commissioner Dr. Cervoni. Thank you for being here. And it looks like we're good to go. All right, Jim, back to you.
I think so, and I think I may have to do it in this mode because some reason my PowerPoint's messed up. So I wanted to start off just by showing an old picture. This is a 1909 picture, and those are the rapids on the Miami River. So before the development of that large flood control system that you heard about from Water Management District, to the west of the coastal ridge, every wet season would pond up and it would drop 3 or 4 feet as it fell across the rapids. So this was what Florida used to look like before all of that drainage canal system got put in place. It's also important to realize that we didn't just change what was going on land, we also changed the nature of the bay itself, the very bay itself. So this picture here, so this is the North Bay, and you can see the black on there are areas that had been dredged by 1925. So they've been made deeper. Now, the communities that we really value out there in Biscayne Bay require a tremendous amount of light to reach the bottom to keep them happy. And water absorbs light, and the stuff in the water absorbs light. So beginning in the early part of the 20th century, we started making it more difficult for seagrasses and corals by making the bay deeper in some places so that we can build islands in other places. So we built areas to live, and we dredged navigation ways for our boats. And then by 1976, you can see that huge swaths of the bay had been deepened. North Bay Village is here, it's been created. The Gorsa Island basically was all connected. So we've changed the nature of the bay itself. And even before 1976, changes to water delivery and water quality began shaping the bay and driving loss of seagrasses from the bottom of the bay. So this is a distribution of seagrasses as it existed, as far as we can tell, in 1925. And this is the system as it appeared in 1976. So it's North Bay Village. This large seagrass meadow here is the one that caused many of the concerns that led to the Biscayne Bay Task Force. So this is a picture from roughly 1985 as North Bay Village. So all of this water in here used to be much more shallow before it was dredged up to build the islands. And then in areas that were shallow enough to get at least 10% of the sun's energy reaching the bottom, we had really extensive seagrass meadows. But it's important to remember that this is only in the shallow water. It didn't extend down into the deeper water because the water now has a quality that doesn't allow light to penetrate it. And in fact, by 1980, there was no seagrass in waters deeper than about 2 meters, or 6 feet, a little over 6 feet. And this is courtesy of my colleagues Brad Furman and Penny Hall at FWC. You see all these squiggly lines. That's the northern extent of the seagrass meadow. The blues are starting in 1984. And as it gets redder and redder, those are more and more modern up to 2015. So you see that we lost seagrasses starting in the north in the deeper water. And those seagrasses basically just retreated into shallower and shallower water in response to decreasing water quality and less light reaching the bottom. We got to the point by 2016, more than half of that bed was gone. It actually was disappearing from this end as well. And now there's very little seagrass left out there. And what happened to the seagrass is basically it was killed because of no oxygen. Seagrasses need a lot of light because they live in nasty soil that has no oxygen in it. So they have to produce a lot of oxygen by photosynthesis to survive. And when they can't, the processes in the soils create really toxic sulfur, and the sulfur kills the grass. So this is what the grass to the south of North Bay Village looked like as it was actively dying in 2015. So it's being killed, it's not getting enough light, and then the lack of oxygen coming up from the bottom is really what did it in. And so these are, there's way too much detail on these slides for you to take in, but here on the left, this is color-coded, blue being low and red being high, and this is the average amount of phytoplankton in the water column for the period 96 to 2015. So you see the northern part of the bay is the place with the most algae bloom. It's also the place with the most ammonia. Well, the most ammonia is actually further south, actually near Black Point. There's a nitrogen source down here, and then the phosphorus is kind of really in relatively high concentrations further south. This is inorganic phosphorus. But then these slides over here are the rate at which water quality is declining, with red being declining fast. So you see that in the North Bay Village area, across the entire system, there are very few places, the Coral Gables Waterway and down by Manatee Bay. Those are the areas where the algae blooms are increasing at the fastest rate, being driven by increases in phosphorus concentrations. And when water quality decreases and we get more and more algae in the water, the algae then robs at night all the oxygen out of the water, and then that leads to the fish kills that brought the Biscayne Bay Task Force to being, or the seagrass brought it to being, and the fish kills really underscored the message that they came out with. So what's the consequences of all this? Well, I argue that people come to Miami because it's beautiful. They don't come here because it's easy to get around or it's cheap. They come here because it's stunningly beautiful. And so much of that beauty is determined by how beautiful our water is and the blue colors of our water. The economic impact of visitors is about $18 billion. And a huge part of that, and that's 150,000 jobs, and a huge part of that is at risk if we continue to have fish kills and water quality issues that stop people from coming to visit. Down to the next slide, go through that one. As we've learned, there is a really beautiful framework for addressing water quality and the health of Biscayne Bay laid out by the Biscayne Bay Task Force. We need to establish science-based pollutant load reductions and interim targets. Right now, the targets that we have are not protective of the resource. We have to work on better ones. We have to develop, implement, and continuously monitor to demonstrate that progress, that we're making progress to them. Danny pointed out, I'm sorry, I forgot who said it earlier, Tampa Bay had these same problems starting in the 1970s, and they made changes to address their water quality seagrass issues in the 70s, and they didn't meet their targets until 2015. So it may take 40, 50 years, but we have to do that now. We have to act now. So instead of going through all that, because I've gone over my time, let me just go one more slide and hopefully left time for discussion later. One thing that Denny approached us about is experimental ways to try to bring back the bay faster than that 40 or 50 years. And we've been talking about the idea of a marine protected area in the North Bay Village area that would become this laboratory for trying out ways to improve the quality of the bay. For instance, can we replant seagrasses? Well, if we're going to replant seagrasses, we have to get more light to the bottom. You can get more light to the bottom either by cleaning up the water, which is going to be a really, really long process, or maybe we can actually recreate the shallow environment that used to be there before we dredged the bay. So we're exploring ways that we can work together on innovative ways to try to accelerate the healing of the bay as we work together as an entire municipality to fix these water quality issues that are driving us in the long run. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim, so much. So as you see, we as North Bay Village are exploring ways on how we can continue to show a bit of leadership on this issue and to provide resources to this amazing scientific community that we have here in Southern Florida. I think everybody has to agree that as we had the fish kill, our scientists, FIU and University of Miami, just were shining. They just came out there and they just started doing everything. They were leading together with NGOs like Waterkeeper. So when we saw all that energy, we said, okay, we got to do something to be able to help this, because it was incredible, the reaction that we saw. And I really found that I was just so proud to be in Southern Florida and to see that, you know, I've been involved with academics my whole life, especially at the UN and in New York. And then I was like, forget it. South Florida showed a much stronger and much more active academic institution and I've seen up north where I was. Okay, on to you, Esber. Esber was our first academic partner. It was thanks to the Miami-Dade Residency Office that we were able to meet Esber, because they organized a presentation by the ULEAG team on next generation seawalls. And we were able to create a partnership. And I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, Ralph and Brent, but I think our MOU might be on the agenda of the next commission meeting. Do I see a head nodding? Oh, yes. So Jim, we have the agenda, the MOU that took us months to sign with University of Miami is going to be on the agenda of the next commission meeting next week for FIU. So we will have two memorandums of understanding with two universities. So over to you, Esber, to explain a bit of what we've been doing and the way forward.
Well, thank you very much, Annie, and good evening, everyone, the North Bay Village leadership, as well as all the distinguished guests and other colleagues and partners. And it's been certainly a pleasure working with North Bay Village for the past few years. And really our experience in this has been that this partnership has been extremely enabling for us to carry out a lot of the work that we have been set out to get done. And so we heard quite a bit about tonight, all the challenges, and we're all very much on the same page, I think. Just a little bit of a background information about me. I'm an associate professor of practice and in the Department of Civil, Architectural, and Environmental Engineering. And I also hold a secondary appointment at School of Architecture. I'm also the director of our Master of Science in Construction Management program. In the past few years, we have been really looking at solutions. Our aim has been, how can we all agree we got these problems, what can we do about it? And what are some of the tangible solutions and immediate solutions that we can start inching away into this problem? And while many of us love doing fundamental research in academia, often transitioning from fundamental research to actual applied research could take decades. And so we started looking at what can we do with already, ready research outcomes that are ready to be deployed, and how can we bring some solutions to the table with that. And one thing I must also say that we really enjoyed with North Bay Village is that as all of us spoke tonight, I think we all recognize how big this problem is and how it is multidimensional and multidisciplinary. And it's not one man's job or one team's job. So it really will take a lot of us put together. So with that, a few years ago, we started thinking about a solution, and we came up with an interdisciplinary team of us that consisted of engineers, architects, economists, environmental economists, marine biologists, and artists, and said, let's join hands and see what we can come up with as an interdisciplinary team for a solution. So we knew, obviously, all the ecological issues, the flood management issues, loss in property values and economic prosperity in our region. Our role and aim really started looking at tackling those from those perspectives. And living in South Florida, or really the whole island or peninsula of Florida, we have extensive coastlines, which are often bordering bays and bodies of water that rely on coastal protection by use of structures. Traditionally, structures were really designed in the past just as retention systems, separating the land from the water. And we started thinking, are they really done the right way? And are they doing us justice and serving the needs of today? So as a result, we came up with a project goal for us collectively that looked at next generation of coastal structures. How should they be built? So one thing we realized that, just like in the case of North Bay Village, the variables vary a great deal. The criteria that we need to address, like as Jim mentioned just a few minutes ago, from the depth of the bay to the marine ecology to the adjacent occupancies and land uses and the tourist interactions and that enjoyment that comes with visiting Florida. So functionality really is very important. So we wanted to establish what are different criteria that should feed into functionality. So we started thinking about that and we classified it with one, of course, structural functionality, that we must sustain the wave energy and the frequent storms that we often experience. The coastal erosion, that's another function that on the forefront, but water quality and how the interaction of land with the bay, what is the role of that structure that is in between? What can we do about that? And we keep talking about the beauty in South Florida. So ultimately, access to water. We all thrive for access to water. All our properties are valued. That's much higher value if they have the water views. And so what there often various measures suggested. Some impinge on so we wanted to come up with, we even deployed a brief survey we shared in the community to gather some feedback. And of course, it was a very clear water and everybody wanted views to water. Nobody liked us to obstruct their views. So we also realized that as frequently as we are experiencing flood events and the structures that we put in the ground, often what are the materials we're using for these structures? So being in South Florida, most of our structures are built with concrete. So with concrete, long time exposure into the bay or into flood waters, what is the outcome of that? So if we even take the really, really ugly thinking and say, at some point we give up and we return everything back to nature. And, at that point, we're leaving behind a lot of structures. So what is, again, the impact of those structures on the marine ecology and bay waters? So therefore, part of this investigation, we are looking at also what should be the next generation of materials in context of cement and cement mixtures, concrete mixtures. How can we make them more biophilic so that they're more in concert and responsive to the ecological needs as well? So North Bay Village was really exciting for us because as big as this problem is, as we're saying, imagine trying to tackle this in a really large area. It's overwhelming. So North Bay Village, the size of the village, the tight-knit community, as well as the passion that you all have heard tonight, and we've certainly experienced for the past few years from the North Beach leadership, it really enabled us. Because if we felt that if we can do this and demonstrate this in a community like North Bay Village, we can certainly expand from there and start applying and looking at it in a more global or national level. So with that, we have identified a few property types or site locations in North Bay Village, just so that we could identify that criteria that might be unique, location-specific criteria or variables that we may need to address. So one of the sites that we looked at was the commercial strip based on the occupancy designations, the zoning designations, and if perhaps the solutions that we may propose may suggest that there should be a change in zoning guidelines in the commercial strip. We thought maybe it's timely because the village is right now looking at that as well anyway. And this area, so it's the first little area that we identified as a sample point, but it really represents that entire strip there, is also directly adjacent, oh, sorry about that, directly adjacent to the protected marine preserve zone that Jim just mentioned, Danny mentioned, what type of seawalls or coastal structures that we propose to develop there. We feel that it's very important that it works hand in hand with the marine preserve zone's needs, for example, that it's complementing it rather than standing in its way. Another area then was the village-owned green park area. And then lastly, we looked at the whole residential single-family strip where we have property owners who are experiencing the impacts sea level rise and the bay water and limitations on how and when, and not everyone is able to really respond at the same time. So we wanted to come up with solutions for these three categories as a starting point so that we could deploy some potential initiatives or programs for exercise. So initially, as part of my interdisciplinary team, we looked at some innovative solutions. So the images you see up on the upper left corner there, we call that a sponge wall. It is intended to be a 3D printed concrete using biophilic cement mixture. As you can see, it has a solid core in the center and perforations on both the water and the shore side. And with the intent of, again, filtering water and also contributing to marine biodiversity and marine life growth really along the water side. However, we do realize that this concept is not something that we're going to be able to deploy tomorrow or next year or 2 years from now. It's a little bit of a more of a fundamental level research investigation that we're looking at with this, but it's something to consider in the years ahead. The image below that is kind of parallels what we were just talking about on the commercial strip. Again, having a bay walk adjacent or in front of that marine preserve zone, giving the community residents the ability to enjoy the bay, providing again a 3D printed down the road seawall concept with biophilic concrete, and between the bay walk and the new seawall, having floating wetlands that can contribute to the water quality and the marine life again. But again, we realize this, there are some examples of these individually done or very incrementally done around our communities or even further up north from us. But putting it all together in one place, again, is something that we're looking at, but we do realize, for example, the floating wetlands. That requires maintenance provisions because the plant species that we're talking about considering there that would absorb the nutrients have to be often. So an early investigation at this point, but it's in the works. The images on the right kind of gives you a more immediate solution kind of an approach where we're creating planting beds with much improved or frequently replenishable filtering media on the land side for better stormwater management, again, to prevent that stormwater runoff and polluting the bay. And then on the bay side, more traditional construction of seawalls, but perhaps using newer innovative technologies. So as part of another team that I'm involved in, which is again from the Department of Civil Architectural Engineering and as well as our Erasmus counterparts, Systen laboratory. So for protection systems, so we arrived at as more of an immediate solution, what we define as a sea hive module. It's a modular element, again, cast using biophilic cement. and reinforced with non-corrosive FRP reinforcement rather than steel reinforcement. So it's highly perforated to encourage, again, the water flow, biodiversity, growth, and the way we're looking at this system is installing it in various configurations. So the image you see on the right, for example, is kind of a seawall reinforcement. All the sea hive modules are installed vertically. We are at a now where we have already cast a few samples of this. We have done extensive testing in our Systen surge tank for testing on the performance for wave energy, wave mitigation, and we are able to then launch it forward on a few pilot projects. So one of those examples, as you see in this image now, we've had some discussions also with Durham on this. They were intrigued and excited, is to assemble them horizontally, replacing traditionally installed riprap. So we do have a location currently in design. Actually, permitting process is just about started. Will probably be submitted within the next few weeks in North Bay Village, Treasures on the Bay condo building. So in a small, just an 8-foot section of a newly installed seawall, we will be installing this system in place of traditional riprap, where we will be collecting data and observing it, what kind of flow we experience, biodiversity, wave energy impact, all of that in the months ahead. And thank you very much again, North Bay Village, for giving us that platform as a remote lab, really, to see this to fruition. We have a new one now that we are just in design, but it will be, although the design is fairly new, the permitting process is more advanced with this one. Because Army Corps of Engineers and the local building department is very much interested in this one. So this is in Wahoo Bay, in the Pompano Beach area. So it is going to be installed in an approximately 150-foot long strip along existing seawall near an inlet. And this is in partnership, in collaboration with a 501c profit, the Shipwreck. What their vision is really very similar to the marine zone that we've been discussing in North Bay Village, to create swim zone, a snorkel zone, to create increased biodiversity and growth. And this particular area specifically is within close proximity of seagrass beds, which have been mapped out. And so we are maintaining about 20 feet separation, a buffer zone between the seagrass beds and this installation. So as you see here, the intent here is to install mangrove seedlings and then see them grow. And hopefully, you know, our mangrove experts that have been partnering with us on this has been advising us it will probably take about 10 years for them to grow up to about 6-foot height. And so they are being strategically placed where viewing windows will still remain from the adjacent park between each pot area. So the depth again varies at this particular location, ranges from 7 to 9 feet. But given the way these modules are installed, we can certainly arrange them, stack them. And they're all secured and attached with, again, fibropolymer rods that are non-corrosive. We have some solid pieces on the bottom that stabilize the ground. And the upper shaded region that you see is filled. So that's what's going to be holding, sorry about that, holding the soil in for the plant. And the bottom elements are all hollow. So it will promote water flow invertebrate habitat and hopefully contribute to improved biodiversity and better ecological health in that area. So, we're looking at similar concepts in other areas, and perhaps this North Bay Village Marine Zone or other areas such as FDOT transportation, the Causeway area where mangrove plantations are considered, could be good exercises. So on to, at the same time, we've been thinking, what else can we do for?
As we're running out of time, I just want to ask you if we could, because we only have now about 15 minutes before.
All right, I'll wrap it up very quickly. I apologize. So, all right, so I'm just going to then show you a few examples of new concepts that we're working on for CAPS, and we want to think of these as lower cost repair, restoration options, raising elevation while improving filtration. So these are, again, specifically in context of unique site conditions. That's how they're being thought of. And then lastly, for the residential areas that allow both on land or water side wall repairs while also adjusting heights. So thank you. And lastly, our example, we've all experienced the fiber polymer reinforced wall cap installations at the Treasures on the Bay, which was an exciting initiative. And thank you very much. I apologize for taking longer.
No, thank you, Esber. No, we were running over all night long. It's always difficult. Mayor Latham, I would like to ask if you want to say a couple of words.
I'll be very brief because I'm the least knowledgeable person in the room tonight. And what I really want to say is I appreciate the input and the team. And it really is amazing to see this concentration of brain power and ability and leverage in one place. And this is what we set out to do 2 years ago. Denise mentioned that we created the Resilience Task Force, and then, to be honest, sort of stepped out of the way and let Denise, Commissioner Streitfeld, Vice Mayor Wilmuth, Commissioner Cervoni was on that for 2 years as well. Now he's a commissioner. Take it away. And the things that have been accomplished are impressive. It's an impressive list, but we're just getting started. And some of the visions that have been shared, already in terms of what we can accomplish here in our community, which, by the way, is more water geographically than it is land. And as Jim mentioned, we came out of the Bay ourselves. We're islands from the Bay, and so there's so much that we can accomplish over the coming years. And I'm so optimistic seeing this collection of brain power and political clout in one place. Help us, guide us, tell us what we can do. I've said, I believe, to each one of you on different occasions, the sky's the limit. Give us your craziest ideas as far as what can be done in resiliency in Biscayne Bay, and we will make it happen if it's within our power with the group that we have here in North Bay Village. So everyone, keep up the good work. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm not going to take up the time with my questions. I'll get a chance to ask those in different forums. Let's open up the floor, Denise, for whoever might want to chime in at this point.
Thank you so much, Brent. Rachel, I don't see raised hands. Can you see from I'm not sure if I'm doing this right.
You're doing it right, and you don't see any raised hands. So I would encourage everyone who has a question to please hit the participants button on the bottom of your screen, and then when the window pops up, hit raise hand on the bottom right. But I did get a question or four in advance from my dear friend just across the bay in Miami Beach, the one and only Dave Dobler. Dave, I want to turn it over to you because you had some really good questions.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I attend a lot of these sessions, and this is a really, really good one. From the task force to South Florida Water Management District to the new innovations. So well put together. So thank you for having us. I want to direct this to South Florida Water Management District. Thank you for acknowledging that the canals that you guys manage are major conduits of upstream pollution, including nutrient and trash. The booms capturing the trash in C7 and C8 are very poorly designed for trash capture, and the maintenance is highly inefficient. And I think we saw some of that in your photos. But these canals present such a fantastic opportunity to clean the water before it goes out to the bay. So what short and long-term plans does South Florida Water Management District have to improve the capture and removal of these nutrients and trash? And if you're looking for ideas, I've got some good ones, so let's host the design thinking session.
Over to you, Armando. And
Sure, I'll take that one. And we're always looking for new ways to remove, trash and other debris from our canals. One of the major issues that we have are conveyance issues. And so when you start putting items that actually block movement of water, it reduces our already dwindling conveyance. A lot of, when you start talking about resiliency and how much water we're able to move, it's very important that we not impede that. And that's one of our major issues when it comes to dealing with the quality of the water that's coming out of there. We do have plans for S27 as far as upgrading that structure. We're working with Miami-Dade County to upgrade that structure. We're seeking a grant from FEMA to add a pump, so it'll give us additional capacity. But since they do have grates, those grates should be able to pick up some of that trash that does escape those booms. We're also looking into getting trucks to be able to remove that trash more readily from the bank instead of having to stage cranes and move in towboats to pick that trash out of there. And we're also always looking for new innovative ways to reduce the cost and make it more efficient, obviously. So we are looking at several things for future.
How big are those grates? I mean, how big is the spacing between them?
The grates for the pumps, they are barely, or maybe 2 inches wide.
Okay, so anything smaller than 2 inches will go through.
Anything smaller than 2 inches will go through.
Time to get creative, Dave.
I mean, I understand the challenge, and as we've seen with the stormwater systems throughout the county and throughout the cities, that trash actually creates an impediment to water flow as well. And so, if we can find a way to shift that trash off to the side, and build a little conveyor belt that pulls that stuff out, that actually would help improve the water flow. There are some interesting projects around, but I just really think that the canals offer the #1 opportunity, because all of that pollution, which is not being created by Water Management District, whether it's out far west, I mean, all of that comes through the canals. And so those systems represent such a tremendous opportunity. When I look at the seagrass die-off that was presented by the professor, when you look at the head of where that all comes from, the head is the canal. And so do the nutrients that come from the canal systems, they're such a major cause. And so you didn't create it, but it's such your opportunity to fix it.
Yeah, and we're definitely working on ways to resolve some of those issues. I think the greater issue also is some of the runoff they were getting from those septic tanks and other aging infrastructure that also has to be fixed. We can put grates in there and we can do all types of augmentations, but that also needs to be fixed to be able to make it work.
Thank you, Armando. I see we have a question from Luis Rodriguez. Luis?
Yes. Hello, good evening, everyone. My question is for, I believe your name is Avila. Forgive me, is Avila, because I see Vilaboy, I forgot your first name. Well, anyway, my question is, sorry?
Armando, first name.
Armando, okay, I'm sorry, yeah, I couldn't see it here on the screen. So my question is, are you guys considering the South Florida Water Management District is considering the implementation of storm drain grates or any different type of strategies that will actually stop the solids from actually entering the canals on the street level? That's one of my questions. And my second question is more for the team that is developing the seawall project for North Bay Village. Is that, have you guys contacted the Biscayne Bay Aquatic Preserves? What are the thoughts in terms of this type of structure, which I think they're fascinating, very innovative, like David said, in terms of their growing, being expanded into the bay and the concerns about seagrass. So these are my two questions. So go ahead. Sorry, Armando, my first question is for you.
Okay, no, that's fine. So initially, when you were talking about drainage outside of the canal system that's not managed by the South Florida Water Management District, there's nothing we can do. We can help local governments either through cost shares if they're available, or other projects to help fix those issues. But one of the major issues that we have on those canals, which is actually prevents us from knowing exactly where things are coming from, is right-of-way and maintenance of those canals. So we have very limited right-of-way. What that is basically easement on either side of the canal, where it creates basically a buffer. If you look at some of the canals that have those large right-of-ways, your pollution coming into the canal is much less because there's much distance you can be seen. And secondly, enforcement. Has to be done through a whole reach of canal, 7 miles at any given time. We've seen it where, we've been driving by and we've seen folks dumping things in the canal. So enforcement is a big one. Also, drainages, we don't necessarily manage drainages and HOAs or outside of the canal system, but like I said, we can work with local municipalities that are seeking cost shares to augment their existing drainage.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Esber, I think there was a question to you also on that.
Yes, and actually an excellent question and a great idea, but at this time, we have not addressed that issue. We have not really looked at these inlet structures, or what can be done, or what some of the innovations could be that respond to the nutrient introduction before it enters into the bay. Really, what can we do to better manage it in the canal systems? But so all our seawall or coastal structure projects so far has focused on properties that are waterfront properties, but perhaps that is something that we will, I just took note of that actually, and that is something very well worth looking into.
Okay, thank you for the response.
Sure.
Jim, all you.
Thanks. Actually, Esber and Luis, I'd like to respond. I've had a great idea, Esber. Just if you can plant mangroves intertidally along those cell ripraps, you can also plant seagrasses subtidally. So Luis was asking about how these seawalls could interact with the seagrasses that are remaining. Well, they could actually be places where we transplant seagrasses. So if you could fill the upper ones with soil, you can fill the lower ones with soil, and we should talk.
Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely the thinking in the marine preserve zone and the Wahoo Bay area. That's what we're looking at. But I think there is opportunities in other areas where the nutrients are first introduced into the bay, that almost we can think of those as harvestable. In a way, similar to the BMATs, that concept. So definitely would be great to talk.
If I can expand on that a little bit more, I have a colleague who's been involved with a project in the Florida Keys that's attempting to address water quality issues by transplanting sponges. So these walls also give us a place to put in active filters, not just the passive filters of your walls, but active filters surfaces on them by using them as an experimental sponge transplantation farming area.
I think
sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
Well, it just coming from the position of being a commissioner and trying to imagine implementing these great ideas into meaningful policy that we could implement here in North Bay Village. One of the things I was just texting with Dave, one of the things we need to figure out is how to craft the appropriate incentives for our residents. In North Bay Village, we don't have public seawalls. All of our seawalls are private seawalls. So if we're going to implement these solutions on a village-wide scale, we would welcome any and all ideas about how to appropriately incentivize our property owners, our single-family homeowners along the water to implement and install these types of innovations. You know, it's a whole lot easier to just hire, you know, a marine contractor to build a seawall the way it's always been built. So how do we introduce this technology in a way that is equitable, affordable, and incentivized?
Commissioner, if I may, two things. One, everything's like, I get so excited because everything is in the Biscayne Bay Task Force report. So one of which is to support a living laboratory for Bay Health. And it sounds like North Bay Village is it from what I'm hearing tonight. And the other one was, is in our natural infrastructure section where we are going to pilot a mangrove residential incentivized type program. So, you know, I think that I keep referring back to, this is like our mini Bible right now for the Bay, so to speak. And I keep referring back to that because we were very deliberate to look at all and everything and under one approach. And Esber, I'm super excited. I need to go see everything.
Thank you, Irela. I want to turn it over to one of the new members of our Planning and Zoning Board and my neighbor and friend, Jack Rotner.
Thank you, Commissioner Streitfeld. And Esber, good to see you again, if only from afar. You know, yes, as the vice chair, now serving on Planning and Zoning, and as Esber knows, and Denny, good to see you too as well, Denny. That I got to tour the research lab of Esber and his team out at University of Miami. And as a homeowner who need of replacing his seawall in the next within the next 6 months before the hurricane season, before it falls in, is how close are we to some of these new sustainable and resilient seawalls and structures that I got to see a year ago to actually coming to fruition here in North Bay Village to homeowners such as myself, and not at the exorbitant costs that, and Rachel made mention of, that the marine contractors are coming back at with this new technology, sometimes being as much as a third of the cost higher. Do you have any ideas on how close we are to it being more mainstream for the areas? I know you mentioned here in the village on the north side of the causeway and the residences.
Well, you know, some of this is very close, Jack. It's the design guidelines, for example, rebuilding seawalls using fiber polymer reinforcement instead of a steel reinforcement, so that you don't have the corrosion of steel and the failure in the wall. That is already happening. We have multiple examples of that being built, and I believe North Bay Village also, in the recent reports that were generated, adopted some of the design guidelines as the recommended method or construction for the next generation of seawalls. Now, beyond that, some of these other innovations are like the Sea Hive, for example. There are certain challenges right now, which also really are challenges for a lot of us in permit processing. So permit processing is usually quite lengthy. It's inefficient at times, and one of our aims is line some of the design guidelines or design conditions. You have to provide a state county product approval, for example. That kind of almost a pre-approval process being established for some of these concepts and innovation so that we can streamline the process. By the way, Danny, congrats to your son. Danny's son, who just defended his master's this morning, I was in his committee, talked about these improvements on permit streamlining. And, you know, so that is a much needed focus area. And along, I'm sure Monica is taking notes as well, that, you know, we need to work all together to see, and they're very much on the same page with us. That's why with the Sea Hive riprap alternative, they said, yes, let's do it. And so they will approve it. Now, in the case of the mangrove or Spartina grass bed installations in this similar type of applications,
Let me call him. Okay.
as I noted
Okay.
earlier, also very much on board with these. So we're getting closer, but not all there, but some aspects very soon.
Thank you. And if I may, Rachel, I believe it was Irela, and you, and I'm also looking very deeply into all of our zoning changes, obviously, as far as incentives. Communities throughout Florida who are way ahead of us with zoning changes, and all of them, if not almost all of them, offer all kinds of incentives. And I think, Irela, you said that in one of your reports, you discussed this. Is that correct? And do we have a link to that to be shared off our website or the sustainability page?
Absolutely. You have the link, and I'd be more than happy to resend it to everyone. There's a easier to read version of our report, but I'll send both. And I just want to give a shout out to Monica, because she was also very instrumental in helping us put together this report and our matrix of short-term, medium, intermediate, and long-term solutions. So, but yes, there's a lot in the report, and I really encourage everyone to take a look at that, because there's many, many things that individual municipalities can do to implement as the county is moving forward as well.
I'd like to make a very brief comment, if I may. Do you have time?
Just very briefly, Luis, because
Okay.
we're over, and I also have a question.
Okay, I'll make this very quick. In fact, it's just a brief comment. I think that as we move forward in exploring all these different strategies in our communities of seawalls and riprap and living seawalls and so on, we're definitely going to run into these challenges with permitting, you know, through Durham and DEP and so on, right? But I think it is time also that we start bringing this issue up to DEP, that our bay is going to start changing drastically in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in terms of sea level rise. So as sea level rises, the ecology of the bay will change. So I think that I hope that they will develop some more flexible permitting process that will allow us to maybe vent a little bit into the bay in order to maintain its ecological balance in the future. So that's all.
Well, Luis, I couldn't agree with you more when I say that, you know, and this is a conversation that I've had in very, very like dip my toe in the conversation of the need for more regulatory flexibility. The wonderful women at Miami-Dade, Durham, and coastal permitting take their jobs very seriously, and they are diligent stewards of our bay. But I think that the regulations that they have to work with are less innovative, and they have not been updated in a very long time. So exactly. That's certainly a project on the horizon. My question is actually for Monica Gregory. I'm very familiar with the concept of an adaptation action area, how it will be incorporated into the comprehensive plan of a local government, and how it can elevate as far as priorities for funding a particular area for infrastructure. And I'm excited that there is a Little River Adaptation Action Area. My question is, what is the county's plan for that AAA?
Yeah, can you hear me, Rachel? Can you?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we actually already have in our comprehensive development master plan now an element for adaptation action areas. And we did a pilot in Arch Creek back in 2016. I'm happy to share that report with you if you want to take a look and see what resulted from that. But this Little River Adaptation Action Area is really the first adaptation action area where we're diving in using that framework from the sea level rise strategy. And what we're going to be doing is identifying specific policies, program investments, and projects across jurisdictions in the area that we're looking at that we can prioritize for investment, just like you're saying. We've had some discussion. Again, it is a new project, and it's something that we're still exploring. We've had discussions about how will land use changes factor in. When is the appropriate time to do that? Right now, we're running into, given COVID, we're not able to do as much outreach as we originally would do with the workshops and getting the community engaged and rallying around, this plan and giving us a lot of feedback so that we can move forward. So I think the land use changes and the zoning elements might come a little bit later. Right now, we're aiming to have an initial adaptation plan, which will really be a living document that'll more focus on coordination across jurisdictions for project investments and for changes in policy, and not maybe so much the land use changes until we can really get more investment from the community. But we're aiming to have something by April. So it's a very short timeline because we're working with DEP. They generously offered us the grant from the Resilient Coastlines program to do the AAA. And again, like I said, it's really our first initiative. So it's really something brand new. Right now, we're really getting a lot of background information on the area. And we're trying to, as one of the main focus points, coordinate across the city of Miami, unincorporated areas of Miami-Dade County, and El Portal. So those are the three jurisdictions that we're really looking at around the Little River and coordinating across for program improvements, but also for capital projects of the next 5 years. So that's one of the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve, is coordinating some of the projects that are happening. So for example, if we have like a septic to sewer conversion happening in some area, and at the same time we have slated for, say 2022, there was a road raising project or a repaving project, we can coordinate those, which is also something that we have as a recommendation in the Biscayne Bay Task Force report. So, they're complementary. I'm going along the same lines, and that's how we're envisioning the AAA, at least for the next 6 months. But it's something that's going to definitely be an ongoing conversation.
Thank you. My question was, in my head, I'm wondering if that area being an adaptation action area makes it higher priority on a septic to sewer conversion list.
Yeah, I would say, again, we're still kind of figuring out what the priorities mean, but since it is going to be, we have to figure out the designation process for the AAA. But the vision would be that it is going to be an area where we'll be prioritizing funding and investments from our office, because that's the area that we're really diving into and looking at. So, around the Little River, it's really an area east of 95. So we're starting kind of small, like Esber was saying with North Bay Village. It could be, if you looked at the entire drainage basin, it's a very big area. So we're starting in a small area to see how it goes, what the next steps will be. But yeah, I would say, the vision is that it's going to be a priority for investments.
Thank you. And I don't see any other raised hands, although Jack and Luis, your hands are still raised, but your questions were answered, I take it. So, Madam Chair, do you have any questions that you want to ask to wrap us up with?
I think that we've gone over time, I'm afraid, and we've abused the patience of all our panelists. I just want to thank you on the behalf of all the residents for having taken your time. I'm very, very excited about the idea that we're beginning to explore how North Bay Village can provide the space for scientific research. So the Marine Reserve, the North Bay Village Marine Reserve, to make it available to all of you. And Jim, I just wanted to let you know that Esber had originally thought of putting seagrass in the sea hive that is going to be installed here, the little one, just 8 feet. And then we ended up having to give up that idea, I think because of permitting complications. But I think the original idea that Esber had was actually already to go ahead with Sea Hive right there. So I hope we're going to be able to collaborate together using the framework of the Biscayne Bay Task Force. I can't overemphasize how important the work is that you have done, Irela, with your team, with the whole task force, by providing us that framework. Without a framework, we will not be able to make progress. So once more, really, congratulations, congratulations. And I also think it's very important that we've been able to look at what the South Florida Water Management District is dealing with. Every time I see those maps of the canals, it just blows my mind. It's so complex, but we have to get measures in place on land so pollution doesn't end up in the canal, because you can spend millions in cleaning the canal if we're just going to continue dumping stuff into it. So I hope that we in North Bay Village can work with all of you and work with our neighbors in keeping pollution out. You have to stop pollution at the source. Spending millions in cleaning up is just an inefficient way of doing it. So with that, I just say thank you, and back to you, Rachel.
Well, there were a couple on the call tonight who were not listed as panelists because we could only have so many. And I want to thank our panelists who gave so much time, not just tonight, but you've been on the phone, on the Zooms with me and with Denny and with Dr. Rosado as we work on these issues together. But I do want to just give a shout out to Lisa Spadafina at DERM and to Hardeep Anand at the Water and Sewer Department at Miami-Dade County. We really appreciate our partnerships with folks at Miami-Dade County who are in the regulatory weeds and have a really hard job to do. And I want to thank them publicly for working with us, for being open to new ideas, and for hearing the concerns of a teeny tiny, super vulnerable community in the middle of our even more vulnerable Biscayne Bay. So thank you all. Thank our residents. Thank you to our board members. There are most of the sustainability and resilience task forces here tonight. Neil and Alicia and Brenda, thank you all for your service. And if anyone has any questions or they want to follow up, please don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us on social or on email. And thank you all again to our panelists. We really appreciate your insight, your public service, your dedication, and your time.
Thank you too. Fantastic event. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Denise. Um abraço.
Obrigada.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Commissioner, Mayor.
And everyone.